Israeli airstrikes have set fires around Beirut's southern suburbs, including Burj al Barajna, Haret Harik, and Hadith, with thick smoke now spreading toward the capital. The Lebanese Ministry of Public Health reported that an airstrike on Beirut's Naweri neighborhood killed 3 and injured 26 others. Rescue teams continue to search for survivors amid the rubble. Earlier, an airstrike targeted a building near Khatem al-Anbiya Mosque in the Naweri area. That comes as a senior Israeli official and Lebanese Foreign Minister Abdullah Abu Habib expressed optimism about reaching a ceasefire deal. Rescue crews have cleared rubble in central Beirut after today's Israeli strike. Israeli airstrikes hit densely populated areas of Beirut and its southern suburbs ahead of a potential ceasefire announcement with Hezbollah. A strike on Beirut's Naweri district killed at least 7, and minutes later, then 10 others. Near strikes hit the southern suburbs after Israel issued evacuation orders. The Israeli military confirmed a large-scale attack on Hezbollah targets across the city. The Israeli Security Cabinet is set to discuss a proposed ceasefire with Hezbollah amid growing U.S. and international pressure. Despite truce talks, cross-border clashes between Israel and Hezbollah escalate. A draft agreement suggests a 60-day transition period, including Israeli withdrawal and Hezbollah weapon relocation. Meanwhile, Lebanon's caretaker cabinet plans to meet on November the 27th to address the ongoing crisis. United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken has announced that a ceasefire agreement in Lebanon is nearly finalized following months of intense diplomatic efforts led by the United States with partners like France. Speaking at the G7 summit, Blinken highlighted the United States' commitment to working with the incoming Trump administration on a Gaza ceasefire. He emphasized that the Lebanon ceasefire aims to end Israeli aggression on Gaza and facilitate the return of displaced people to their homes. Explosions were witnessed across Beirut's southern suburbs as expectations grow of an incoming ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah. Lebanese media reported that the occupation forces launched a series of heavy airstrikes across southern Lebanon, causing significant destruction and casualties. The airstrikes targeted Tyre, several villages in Bint Jbeil, and nearly destroyed a building near Nabatea. The United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon has expressed deep concern over the numerous attacks on the Lebanese army. UNIFIL reiterated that these strikes violate UN Security Council Resolution 1701 and international humanitarian law. The peacekeeping force called on all parties involved in the conflict to resolve their differences through negotiations, not violence. Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has described the ceasefire proposal with Lebanon as a historical mistake ahead of a security cabinet meeting. Ben-Gvir told Israeli media that it would be a historically missed opportunity if Israel stopped everything and went backwards. He said that Israel has a historic opportunity to act decisively in the south and north of the nation. Israel's security cabinet, chaired by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, will convene to discuss the approval of a ceasefire deal with Lebanon. A senior Israeli official confirmed that Israel is prepared to approve a US-backed ceasefire plan which stipulates Israeli troops withdrawing from southern Lebanon and the Lebanese army deploying in the area within 60 days. The agreement also calls for Hezbollah to end its armed presence south of the Litani River. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has emphasized the need for effective UN enforcement of the ceasefire, warning that Israel would show zero tolerance for any violations. French Foreign Minister Jean Roder Noel Barrot has mentioned that there is a window of opportunity for a potential Lebanon ceasefire, urging parties to act. Speaking at the G7 Foreign Ministers meeting in Italy, Barrot noted that Israel was likely to approve a United States-France plan for a ceasefire with Hezbollah. He also emphasized the need for Europe to send Ukraine.
À la toute fin du mois de septembre, nous avons mis sur la table une première proposition en appelant les parties à...
German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock has said that the war on Lebanon is at a critical point, with a Lebanese ceasefire potentially near. At the G7 meeting in Italy, Baerbock urged Israel to end Gaza's suffering. Baerbock also announced that the 2 additional RST air defense systems would be sent to Ukraine by year end, with Germany contributing over 37 billion euros in support since the war began.
Während auf Israel weiter Raketen der terroristischen Hisbollah niedergehen.
European Union Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell has urged Israel to approve a US-backed ceasefire deal with Hezbollah. Speaking at the G7 summit, Borrell assured that the deal includes all necessary security guarantees. He also emphasized there is no excuse for delay and called for immediate action. Earlier, a senior official at Israel green light the agreement
for not implementing a ceasefire. Otherwise,
Lebanese Foreign Minister Abdullah Abu Habib has expressed hope for a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. At a G7 meeting in Italy, Abu Habib mentioned that Lebanon's army would deploy 5,000 troops in southern Lebanon as Israeli forces withdraw. He also proposed that the United States be involved in rebuilding infrastructure. Israel is expected to approve a US-brokered ceasefire with the Security Cabinet meeting later to discuss the agreement.
Tonight we will have this ceasefire. Exactly. I think
the death toll from Israeli attacks as the ongoing Israeli aggression in Lebanon, which began on October 8, 2023, has reached more than 3,700, with injuries now totaling to 15,700. In its latest update, the Lebanese Ministry of Health reported that 14 people were killed and 73 others were injured in the past 24 hours alone. Among the casualties, 12 deaths were attributed to Israeli strikes on 2 locations in the Tyre district in southern Lebanon, highlighting the escalating toll of the conflict. For more analysis, we now move on to Riham Morsi in our newsroom. Riham?
Thank you, Rana. To help us analyze what's happened today at Italy's G7 summit, we're joined from Amman by Professor of Strategic Studies, Mr. Hassan Al-Daji. And welcome to Qnews, sir, and thank you for joining us. Firstly, sir, let's start off by asking, how are the developments in Gaza and Lebanon being addressed at the summit? And are there indications of progress towards a solution, a permanent solution, even though now there is talks of a possible truce between the Israelis and the Lebanese?
Good evening to you and to all. I think the countries which consist the G7, mostly they are, most of them, they are member of the Security Council by the United States and France and Britain, especially when we talk about the ceasefire. Last time when the decision shown in the Security Council, the U.S. Used the veto vote against the ceasefire. So, what's the fun when they come to G7 and they ask by their press release they want to stop and to ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon? I think this double stand and this speech is not concerned that much as it is mean in the reality, because in reality that United States and the West especially, they provide Israel with the tanks and the military equipments and missiles and other aid of logistic aid and political and logical support in UN. So I think if they want to cease fire in Gaza and Lebanon, they can do it to put more pressure in Israel to stop the war. I think America will not move to stop the war unless the Israeli people are affected, as we know that the threat by the Lebanese, the Hezbollah missiles to Tel Aviv and to Haifa and to Akka and to ask people to because now it's not safe because it's aimed and targeted as military bases or places. So now there is the exchange of balance between Israel. Israel is also hit by airstrike. Beirut and different places.
Yes, they've escalated. They've escalated their actions in Beirut today, as you've said, sir. But do you think this will factor into the idea of a possible ceasefire, especially that they're talking about that it should be within a few hours, maybe by tomorrow morning maximum?
I think the assumption that when more affected people and failure to fulfill the objectives and goals of the military process in Lebanon, because it's failed, they want to gain the same objective and goals by political means. Now they couldn't reach what they promised their people, that they will return them to their home by the military operation. Now the military operation become to be clear to the Israeli people that Netanyahu was telling lie. More than 80% of the Hezbollah forces and other bases. Now it become clear that he cannot fulfill his promises to the people who lives in this settlements by the war. So he will go back to ceasefire because he needs that. He could not get any of his objective to be fulfilled and implemented in Lebanon. Yes.
So, sir, you slightly touched on the idea that the G7 were more focused on the Ukraine conflict itself. If we could focus on that for now, what effect has the recent escalations in Ukraine had on summit discussions?
I think the G7 just trying to go beyond the limits of the American transfer of power from Biden to Trump, because there's different vision. Now the G7 they talk about supporting and backing Ukraine. Now when Trump will come, this policy will be changed, totally will be changed. So I think this is because they wish to complete and to back up and to support Ukraine. But when after the Trump will come in office in 20 of next January, I think everything will change. Now the sound in Europe that Ukraine should talk to Russia, should start negotiation. Now also we have seen the consular, Germany consular, he applies these things by Ukraine and Russia. This speech is new come out after the election and winning of Trump the election in the United States.
Okay, so sir, you were talking about the idea that it's a wait-and-see game until the 20th of January of next year, but what possible outcomes could emerge from the summit to help resolve the current crises around the world?
I think, as usual, G7 always think as a Western bloc is governing the world, influencing the world, and influencing the policies of the world. And we have to think that there's a G7 and the opposite of G7, there's BRICS, there's Shanghai. Now the world is going and dividing in two blocks again, as it was before in 1870, and the direction of policy in the world will be in two parts, not in one vision and one direction as it is before. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Professor of Strategic Al-Daji. Thank you so much for joining us here on Qnews, and thank you for your insights. Now back to you, Rana, in the studio.
Thank you very much, Riham. And now we move on to the latest developments in Gaza. China's permanent representative to the United Nations, Fu Kong, has called on the United Nations Security Council to act swiftly in addressing the ongoing Israeli aggressions in Gaza. Speaking at a Security Council meeting on Monday, Fu emphasized the urgent need for a decisive action, warning that any delay would lead to greater destruction and increased civilian casualties. Fu criticized the US for vetoing a draft resolution on November 20th that called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, which he said only escalated the crisis. Since the veto, hundreds of civilians have been killed and the situation continues to deteriorate. He urged the Security Council to fulfill its responsibilities without further delay, stressing the dire consequences of inaction as violence in the war-torn region intensifies.
由于个别国家的消极态度，安理会在这场测试中的表现是不合格的。
Gaza's health authorities have confirmed that the Palestinian death toll from the Israeli onslaught since October the 7th has risen to over 44,200, with more than 104,700 individuals injured. Israeli occupation forces have committed 3 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours, killing at least 14 Palestinians and injuring 108 others. The Israeli occupation forces have continued artillery shelling across the Gaza Strip, killing and injuring several Palestinians. Medical sources reported that dozens were killed and injured after the Israeli occupation forces struck a house in Jabalia in northern Gaza. Week, speaking to G7 foreign ministers, Tajani stressed the need for unity on the matter. The United States, which is a G7 member, rejected the ICC's decision earlier today.
Si potrà avere nel comunicato finale una parte dedicata a questo. Stiamo lavorando per trovare.
Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has proposed a controversial plan to reduce Gaza's population by half within 2 years through what he described as voluntary migration. Speaking at a conference organized by the Israeli Settlements Council, Smotrich also called for the reoccupation of the Gaza Strip, reiterating his hardline stance on the region. The remarks have drawn sharp criticism from Palestinian leaders and international human rights organizations, who have condemned the proposal as a violation of human rights and a dangerous escalation on the ongoing conflict. More than 10,000 tents in Gaza's Khan Yunis have been blown away by strong winds and rain, forcing displaced civilians to move their tents to areas far from the beach in very difficult conditions. Director of Health Programs in Gaza stated that citizens lack winter clothes, heating devices and blankets in light of the significant drop in temperature. He also noted that the spread of famine in the Gaza Strip and the percentage of children suffering from malnutrition reached 40% in the south. On another note, President-elect Donald Trump has announced plans to impose a 25% tariff on all imports from Mexico and Canada, starting January the 20th. He stated that this measure would be one of his first executive orders targeting illegal drug trafficking. According to a statement from Trump on Truth Social, the proposed tariffs would remain in place until the issues of illegal border crossing and drug smuggling are resolved. In a follow-up post, Trump announced that the United States will be charging China an additional 10% tariff above any additional tariffs on all of the many Chinese products that come into the United States.
The spirit is unbelievable. I don't think there's ever been.
Bitcoin's price has fallen sharply as of 5:55 a.m. Eastern Time. Bitcoin was trading down 6.2% at $92,446.38, with its current value at $92,410. Bitcoin reached a fresh high of above $99,000 last week, and a 46% increase since Trump's win in the United States election. The overall market capitalization for cryptocurrencies decreased by $182 billion, bringing it down to $3.35 trillion. Moving on to the global shares, which fell as concerns grew over President-elect Donald Trump's statement about imposing sweeping new tariffs on Mexico, Canada and China upon taking office. In the United States, the S&P 500 rose 0.3%, the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 0.4%, while the Nasdaq Composite was 0.6% higher. In Europe, France's CAC 40 declined 0.9%, while Germany's DAX slipped 0.6% and Britain's FTSE 100 shed 0.5%. In Asian trading, Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 dropped 0.9%, South Korea's Kospi dipped 0.6%, Hong Kong's Hang Seng inched up less than 0.1%, and the Shanghai Composite fell 0.1%. That brings us to the end of our bulletin. Here is what we have been covering. Israeli airstrikes on Beirut suburbs killed 3 and injured 26 others as officials express ceasefire optimism. Israeli Security Cabinet to discuss ceasefire with Hezbollah amid intensified cross-border fire and pressure. And Blinken says Lebanon's ceasefire in final stages amid ongoing US-led diplomacy. This concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.